3rd, 2025 meeting of the Master Plan Working Group. We'll begin with a roll call of the members. Bob Carroll,
Yeah, Bob's here.
Victoria Duckworth,
Here.
Lindsay Fox,
Here.
Anne Marie Foley. I know she wasn't able to make it. Deborah George, Brian Houle,
Here.
Chantel Kimball,
Here.
Essek Petrie, David Robbins is here, Sue Robbins,
Here.
Colleen Roy, and Roshan Utangi. That is 7 out of 12. That's sufficient for a quorum. We'll proceed with our agenda. I think you'll notice on your screen 2 Sarah O'Briens. One of them is the real Sarah O'Brien, and the other is Dominique. And Fiona is not with us tonight. Natalia, the assistant planner, is the Zoom host for this. Let's begin with our action item agenda. We have 2 meeting minutes from January 6th and February 3rd to be reviewed and approved. I know that there were a couple of name corrections and 1 attendance correction that were forwarded to staff at the end of last week. Specifically, January 6th, Brian Hull was not marked as being present on the draft agenda, but he was in fact at the meeting. February 6th, Brian and Lindsay's names were misspelled, but those will be corrected in the final minutes. Are there any other comments, additions, or corrections to the minute, or might there be a motion?
I can make a motion to accept the minutes for January 6th and February 3rd.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Anything other than the corrections I've already noted? If not, we'll take the roll call vote. Bob Carroll,
Yeah, Bob's aye.
Victoria Duckworth,
Aye.
Lindsay Fox,
Aye.
Brian Hull,
Aye.
Chantal Kimball,
Aye.
David Robbins votes aye. Sue Robbins.
Aye.
Declare the motion carried unanimously. Takes care of our action item agenda. So I think the main attraction for this evening was a discussion of the first draft, or at least partial draft, of the implementation section, and for which CMRPC staff had provided us with a brief narrative and a sample implementation matrix. So Sarah, do you want to kick off the discussion of this?
Thank you so much. I would love to start with a shout out to Natalia. I'm so glad she's here today. She's been instrumental to this entire project, completely behind the scenes, and it's been fantastic to work with her to get our agenda items up and to make sure everything on the town communication side is squared away. So I know she's not on screen, but I hope she's listening, and we owe a lot of thanks to you. We're here tonight with
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
We're here tonight with Dominique, who assisted with the implementation side, the side we've all been excited for. We shared some narrative with you all that she can go over, and a sample of what the implementation matrix will look like. So I will pass it over to her.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you tonight. Is there a way that I can screen share?
Let's see.
It's okay. It's okay if not. So as Dave had said, we had sent out a brief sort of introduction into, covering what's the importance of implementation, what are some approaches that provide some context for the implementation table that's in development. So
hold on a sec. You should be able to share your screen.
Okay. It's weird. For some reason I don't know. Okay, here we go. So did everybody have a chance to take a look? So the narrative, again, it was brief. It really talks about, you know, it's very easy for a really well-crafted master plan to nevertheless end up sitting on a shelf and gathering dust if implementation isn't, well thought out and coordinated. So one of the first steps that a committee can take is putting together an implementation committee for the master plan that really oversees the implementation of all of the action items. So that's something that we touch on, and we talk about some, best practices. There are different tools such as a, digital tracker tool and different ways of trying to encourage implementation. Right, here we go. Sorry, it seems like I'm having a little bit of IT difficulty tonight. Sarah, would you be able to pull up the screen? I think my computer's just lagging, or can everybody see that now?
There we go.
Now it's okay.
Okay, so again, the brief narrative sets the stage for an implementation matrix. As many of you know, this is a pretty standard way of organizing really the key strategies, goals, objectives, and strategies that are included in many plans. It's usually included at the end of a master plan or other lengthy plan. It's one of many people will flip simply to the implementation matrix if they don't feel like reading the broader plan or narrative. It's a great tool for just, working through various tasks. So in this sample that we've provided you, we plan to have one, organize it by chapter. So taking all of the action items and making sure we've couched them in their goals and objectives so they make sense. But really it's focused on how do we implement the action items. So in column C, you can see for the town services and facilities chapter, we have included all of the action items. We go through and list them one by one. Again, we've included the goals and objectives so that they have some context, but we won't be operationalizing the goals and objectives because that can get a little funny trying to explain how to do something very general or higher level. So some proposed ways that we're looking at operationalizing the action items, and these are pretty typical to us, but they can, be tweaked based on what you guys think might be most useful to the town. So we look at priority. So is it low, medium, or high priority? And the narrative explains a little bit about how one might determine that priority. How long might it take to complete? Is this something that can be done in 6 months, or, could it take 10 to 15 years? Magnitude of cost. So it can be helpful sometimes to list out, are we talking about a $500,000 project or a $50,000 project? So typically we include some ranges, maybe 0 to 50,000, 50,000 to 150,000. Maybe one more category, and then maybe 500,000 and above. So that was intention there. We typically highlight who's going to be the lead. So who might nominally be in charge of advancing this, making sure it moves forward and moves forward well. Potential partners. So who might be important to bring to the table? Maybe it's the Chamber of Commerce, or maybe it's MassDOT, since we're looking at services and facilities, whoever it is, we list the partners, and that's in column H. And then finally, and I think this in many ways for us is where CMRPC brings a real value, is identifying the resources and the funding sources. So not every single action item is necessarily going to have an identified grant source. We wish they did, but wherever we know about them or can find them, we list them here. And if there's not a grant source, we'll list something else, like the most reasonable source of funding that we can imagine. So maybe it's town meeting, maybe it's something else. But so that's what we've proposed to lay out for the implementation matrix. I'd love to hear your immediate thoughts on whether the different sort of criteria that we've listed here makes sense for you, or if there's something else you would like to see.
Any thoughts or comments from anybody on the group here? Sue.
I just wanted to know, how do you determine the priority? Is there a scale or something that you use to determine priority?
So it's very subjective. So traditionally what we've done is based on our team's, year and a half, 2 years of working with all of you and with the town. We usually have you know, we can guesstimate what might be a reasonable priority, but so we often fill this in, we take a first crack at it and then come and sanity check it with you folks and the planning board and board of selectmen and the other people in town. So that's how we would propose to do that. In the implementation narrative, we talk about a couple of reasons that something might, you know, that might inform priority. One would be, you know, general, like broad, well-documented town consensus. If everybody in town was saying, for example, we desperately need X, then desperately need X, it's critical, it's an emergency, it's urgent, it's a public safety, you know, some such criteria. And that was pretty well established. That would probably be a high priority. If there was something that was a quick win that could be easily done and without expending a lot of capital, that's, again, you know, obviously documented, important to most of the town folks, that might be a high priority as well. So, but there's no nothing more concrete than that at this point.
Okay, next hand up is Brian.
Yes, thank you. On action items, I'm just curious, how do you delve in, what level of detail are you looking for? Is it, you know, I've noticed on some of these, you know, it's rather general. Do you dive down deeper somewhere else with regards to the action items, or is this just to kind of give somebody an idea about what the action item is without any additional detail? How does that work?
So this is intended to be a boiled down version of all of the strategies in the plan, but without all of the window dressing. So it's intended to be, you know, an at a glance resource that the town can use to refer. Okay, are we making progress on implementing the master plan? And just a quick look, check, check, check. One thing that we could do that I haven't done in the past, but might provide some value, would be adding a page number to where this is located in the plan if somebody wanted to click back and get more information. We could even we might be able to link it at some point. I'm not sure.
Okay, next hand up is Essex.
Hi, thanks. And I apologize if you mentioned this when you were going over the general titles, but the magnitude of cost, what is the scale and kind of metric for that? Is it actual numbers, or is it going to be just kind of low, medium, high, or how is that going to be set up?
You know, historically, the way I've done this is providing some ranges. So it's, you know, without, you know, sort of ballpark costs. So the reason I haven't put it in here is because sometimes towns want to tie this to their capital improvement plan. They have the costs broken out in capital improvement plans certain ways or other plans. But, you know, that's usually something around, there's maybe 4 or 5 ranges. So 0 to 50, 50 to something, you know, 150, 200, 250, 250 to 500, and then 500 above, something like that is how I've typically done it and often seen it. But there's, that's what I would propose to do.
Okay, that makes sense. That gives you a lot of flexibility there, but still staying pretty general, though. Thanks.
Sure.
All right, next hand up is Victoria.
Yeah, thank you. This is phenomenal. I think this is such a nice, quick way for someone to look at, like, okay, what are you actually asking from me, right? Like, you've put in all this work to write all of these words, but like, what is the actual playbook that you are expecting of me, the taxpayer, or the chair of the select board, or whatever? So I think this is phenomenal. I do things like this a lot in my day job. And so the one thing that I'm thinking about is your priority column. I hear you saying that you have ranked priority based off of the conversations that we've had, the conversations that you've had. But I think that there's always an opportunity to increase quantitation, particularly when it comes to convincing folks to take action on a giant list. So I'm wondering if there's a way to add just like one step deeper in priority. Maybe there's a risk column and it's high, medium, low. We define risk as impacts to the community if it doesn't exist or if it doesn't happen over the time to completion. Maybe it's a return on investment that's, you know, similar. It's not necessarily revenue, but, you know, something about the community. how much we feel we get out of it in some sort of numerical scale. I don't know, just thoughts to maybe make that a little bit more solid and a little bit harder to argue with when folks inevitably wish to do so.
I think it's a wonderful idea. I'd love for it to be less squishy, less very subjective. So however, if you folks can talk your way through an approach to doing that, I think it's a great idea.
Think about it.
So
Okay,
ROI, risk. Yep.
Next hand up is Chantel.
Yes, I am not sure when the appropriate time is to chat about this, but I really thought we had landed on those school items not being, I'm not sure I'm gonna phrase this well, but to say that constructing 2 new school buildings is even a medium priority, I don't think is accurate. My recollection from that discussion was that it was sort of a, hey, if money were no object, what would you want to do with Dr. Cummings? And I'm just concerned that especially if it's so early on in the document, we're telling people, oh, we're going to go build 2 new schools. Like that's not even anything that the school committee is vetted. It hasn't been really identified as a need in terms of school population. And I feel like that could be especially damaging right now when we're approaching basically a school funding crisis for it to. So I'm not sure where in the discussion that belongs, but that item just jumped out at me immediately as a
Sure.
item.
So one way that we have tackled implementation matrices in the past is so oftentimes we have CMRPC staff who've worked closely with the town take a first crack at filling this out based on what we think we have heard and understood. Alternatively, we've also given them to the committees and said, you can take a best crack at sometimes they divide them up. You folks know a lot about public services, you folks know not a lot about natural resources, and people take them and fill them out themselves. And then CMRPC comes back in and provides what we know for resources and funding. So that's also a way that could, streamline us having to just kind of randomly guess and probably be wrong on much of the things. Sometimes priorities not included either. There are lots of these columns are all discretionary. So I think the more simple, in my mind, I've found implementation matrices to be most useful when they're most simple. That's maybe not everybody's feeling. But anything that's not useful or could be a sticky issue, we can also consider not including if you want to go that direction.
Yeah, just a bit of a follow-up on that. I think what's in front of us here is one section of the implementation matrix with CMRPC's sort of initial thoughts on things like priority and time frame. It probably would be a good thing for us as a committee to, once we see the complete implementation matrix, I think we could easily weigh in on what we see, given what we know about Grafton, what we see as sort of the right or at least our ideas about what the priority and time frame really should be. So just don't take we shouldn't take what we see on the screen in front of us right now as this is the way it's going to be. This is a starting point for discussion and consideration, and certainly I think we as a committee would want to have a lot of input on what this finally looks like. So next hand up is Bob Carroll.
So David, I think you just answered most of my questions. They were more procedural. So I'm guessing, right, you get the 2 tabs, the quality of life and the services. You're going to expand this probably for all the rest of the chapters, right?
Yes, they're in draft form at this point.
Yeah. So this is just a model to show us. And then
Yes.
Kind of jumping on that, my concern is, once we populate this with all the chapters, and then we've got all these high priorities, how to filter or, prevent overload. Because there'll be a whole lot of priorities that probably are high, and, what's the thinking there?
So I think Sarah has designed this version as a pivot table, so you can, as long as it's in Excel, you can sort and filter. So that, users could streamline at least the information that they're looking at. We at CMRPC have just created an digital implementation tracker for master plans. It's kind of in beta version, but I think it's an exciting new tool. It's a little bit of a step up off of an Excel document or what would be a PDF in the end for your plan. So it's made in Airtable, so it's embeddable in different websites, the town website, master plan website. It's highly sortable and filterable and searchable. Also assign responsible parties and have them get email notifications and reminders to, has this been implemented? So it has some additional functionality that can help with, I think, information overload, and because you can just hide all the sections that, you don't want somebody to see or have to deal with, and also staying on track.
Okay, that sounds promising. I didn't catch the name of the technology.
We haven't named it yet. I would call it Digital Implementation Tracker, and it's something that we could build for you
But
after this
is it all
master
built
plan
on
is done.
Excel, or
It's actually built in Airtable.
what is Airtable? That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, it's a sort of a contemporary database type program. It costs $250 a year, and
So it's a SaaS that's in the cloud?
Yep.
Okay.
And that's something we could do after the master plan if you like. Easily.
Okay, yeah, no, I can check that out. Thanks.
Sure.
Anything else, Bob?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so I will weigh in with a couple of comments here. First thing is that this looks rather familiar to me, mostly because I'm the chair of the I guess you could call it the implementation committee for the open space and recreation plan, where we came up with the open space and rec plan came up with something similar, except when we built that plan, we didn't take the step of identifying who would be the lead agency. We just listed all the agencies, mostly town boards, committees, and departments, and other organizations that would be a part of it. So the first thing we did as an implementation committee was we had to go through and figure out, well, who should be taking the lead on this? Because that's a very important thing. That some single entity, a town board, committee, or department or individual has got to be responsible for the implementation of each action item. And so that's very important. And so what I'm seeing here is consistent with what I've learned with the open space and rec plan. We've been tracking that now for about 3 years, and we're able to see progress. As every year we ask the responsible agencies to report on their progress for their action items. And so this is, I think we're looking at very much the same approach here with the implementation committee, and maybe with the support of a tool that facilitates that. It's just a little bit cumbersome to be sending out requests for reports and then bringing those back and collecting them and putting them into a database or a table or whatever. But that's sort of a technical detail of how you do it. The important thing is to be able to track it. The other thing that is probably important to consider here is that once this plan is published with an implementation matrix, the implementation matrix is not all of a sudden cast in concrete and unchangeable. The folks responsible for implementing this are almost certainly going to see that, well, maybe things aren't going to play out quite the way we thought we would. They're maybe going to see, as time goes on, things need to be reprioritized. timeframes may need to be changed. We thought we needed to do this next year, but really it doesn't need to be done for 10 years or the other way around. We thought we could put this off for 15 years, but actually we got to get it done sooner. So this has to be kind of viewed, even, once we've published this, it still has to be viewed as sort of, this is our starting point, and we want to work through, as we proceed through implementation. I think we're going to want to be able to adjust this, as I said, reprioritize, or whatever, even redefine some of the action items, the work to be done. Maybe it's not quite what we thought it would be. So it's kind of, like I said, it's not cast in stone right now, but this kind of pulls it all together. And one thing that Bob kind of hinted at, I think it sounded like anyway, was that when you look at all the action items together, you may find that you've identified too many things as a high priority, and you made it look like there's too much work all at once. And so, again, I think this is part of the ongoing work of an implementation committee, or however we organize that, is to sort of be maybe every year sort of reevaluate priorities and timeframes, and try to manage it so that in the end we get done what needs to be done. But yeah, we can't, we can't know exactly how this is all going to play out, but we have to have something to start with. And I think with with what we've seen here, and once this is completely filled out and we all have a chance to review it and sort of arrive at something that we as a group are comfortable with, and then we go from there. Any other thoughts or comments? No, I guess Sarah and Dominique, it's like, finish this and share it with the committee, and we'll go from there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Are there any comments on the narrative that was sent out with it? I think, Bob, you hit the nail on the head. So we say in the narrative, it's important. This plan was designed to facilitate informed decision-making. It's a roadmap and not a definitive blueprint. So the really important thing is that not that every single action item get implemented that's on this list in the exact manner, but rather that the vision, the goals, and the policies of the plan get implemented. So I think you can couch the implementation matrix in that. No comments on the narrative? Oh, Brian?
Yeah, I was gonna compliment you on that. Part of it, as far as the narrative goes, the idea that there will be, for instance, all these high priorities, but politics will play a role, something else will play a role in terms of what are the priorities of the town at the time will determine when and if all these priorities are implemented. So I thought that was a good part of your presentation and the overall description of the implementation committee.
Thank you.
Okay, I did have one other thought. Again, relates to my experience with the open space and rec implementation plan, and that is that probably a majority of the action items are
stop.
sort of.
Sorry.
So there are things that specific actions, basically studies that need to be done, or buildings that need. There's a collection of just action items which have sort of easy metrics to measure progress by. We're halfway there. We're done. There's a subset of them that are more, and we saw this in the open space and rec plan. There's a number of the action items which are just ongoing things. There are things you need to pay attention to every year. Those are not things that you can measure. You can never say we're done with them. You can never say we're 30% done or anything like that. So in terms of measuring progress of implementation, it's good to sort of distinguish those two general categories of action items that, with an ongoing item, you can't, you'll never say it's done. The most you can do is report every year, well, this is what we did this year on that. And sometimes there's useful, sometimes it's really, there's not much you can say about it. It's just, we got to do this every year, keep doing it. So that's more, thinking ahead to, to how we measure the progress as we go through implementing this plan.
David, do you think that we should include metrics in this table?
That's a good question. It might not always be clear from the description of an action item what the metrics should be. And it might be, and I haven't really tried to think this through, but it might be that, metrics for measuring progress is something that the implementation team or committee can figure out. Look at each action item. Is this something for which there are useful metrics to measure progress? And some of them there will be, some of them there won't. I don't know whether, without looking at the whole thing, I don't know whether there's enough of that would make it worthwhile trying to include some metrics or suggested metrics maybe in the implementation matrix. It's something to think about, but I don't know off the top of my head whether that would be sufficiently useful to include in this table. Maybe not. So, Bob Carroll, your hand is up.
Yeah, so as far as the narrative and the language for the implementation committee, has this been done or rolled out anywhere else that would serve as like a case study? And what I'm looking for are more specifics, what is like the charge, what are the terms? Does this committee report up to the Board of Selectmen or the town administrator, right? More of the details.
We don't, as you might have seen, so we don't dive into those details in this narrative, at least as it currently stands. Just we could do a deeper dive for sure if if there is a sense of consensus in terms of those details. We could definitely flesh it out. We could even provide in the appendix like a sample master plan steering committee charge. We could talk about the ideal number of so in previous versions of this, we have included some of those details, but this version is a little more generalized. I talk about the number of members, we talk about accountability, those
So
sort of
has
things.
this been done? I mean, is anyone ahead of us on the learning curve here?
Yeah, so it's the implementation matrix I've used this a few times, a bunch of times for different towns, and every plan we tweak it a little more. I'd call this the latest and greatest version over the last 7 years, but it's been used in a bunch of plans in some way or form.
But what about the committee part as far as the follow-up?
No. So I don't usually end up getting super involved with the master plan implementation committees, for better or worse. So I've noticed that those who have the implementation committees usually do better than those that don't, by far. But I don't usually end up getting to interact, so I can't speak to a ton to the the best practices and their success, or speak to the outcomes really.
So yeah, I'd be interested in other communities that have adopted this approach, right, and already have these.
With regard to having a master plan implementation committee?
Yeah.
Okay, that's something we could try to find out, what percentage.
I mean, you don't have to necessarily, give us the name of the community. Just, you could, anonymize it, right, and just give us kind of a case study. Because I think, personally speaking, it'd make me feel better, and I can't speak for everyone, but to know that this has been tried, right, and has been used to great success or not, elsewhere.
Sure, I don't think I was speaking as clearly as I could have. So the implementation matrix itself, I would say, is fairly standard in the planning field. So
Yeah.
that I think that setup is pretty tried and tested. Some towns include even less details. So I'd say this is a slightly, when it's done, it'll be slightly more robust. And I think, you know, I think that model has worked quite well. So we're gonna
I'm
give it
not
to
so
you guys.
concerned about the matrix, right?
Yeah.
And the tracking. It's more, you know, how and what body takes this forward, right, afterwards to affect change. And how others, you know, hopefully learning from them or at least leveraging their leading practices, you know, take this and you know, do something with it, right?
Yeah, I think, Bob, it's kind of like, you know, we have a sort of a limited example of that with our Open Space and Rec Committee, which is acting as an implementation committee for the Open Space and Rec plan. So we have a little bit of experience, but I think it would be interesting for us to hear how other towns have implementation committees comparable to this, and how successful those implementation committees have been in guiding the progress of a master plan. While I think of it, because this is the thought sort of enters and leaves my brain. One of the questions that's frequently asked about the master plan here is, okay, we come up with this action plan, but we have no mechanism to make all these things happen. And, you know, to the extent that an implementation committee can help to make things happen, yeah, that's sort of it. But there's nothing that says by law the planning board is required to do everything it's assigned to do in this implementation matrix. You know, so it's sort of so I'm kind of getting things off track a little bit, but you know, that's one of the reasons why, to me, it seems important to have the lead agencies on each one of these action items buy into it and basically agree, yes, we should do this. We will make it a goal of this, you know, board or committee or whatever. We'll make it our goal. We'll make it part of our plan of action for the year or whatever it turns out to be. But you know, without all the important participants buying into this, it's going to be difficult to make things happen.
We can include all of the best practices that we know. So, I mean, there are, you know, very evident and well-documented best practices. So, you know, I think who's on the committee, the engagement and buy-in of the selectmen, of the town administrator. So, I mean, there are a whole bunch of things, and we can provide more details in terms of those specifics to help us have some teeth, if you like.
Yeah,
I think it'll be good. And then, I mean, worst case, David, we use the open space as a model, right?
I mean, yeah, we've got a model to work with.
Right.
We're using in this town, but yeah, I would certainly think, yeah, I think we probably all would appreciate drawing on the experience of others. You know, find out, you know, if other people have taken particular approaches that turn out to be pretty successful, or other people have learned that, yeah, we've tried this and it doesn't really work very well this way. You know, draw on as much experience as we can in trying to make this work for us.
I can
Right, Bob?
incorporate all of those prior to the returning this to you guys, so that's not a problem.
If I could have, Mr. Chair, your neighbor Westboro had a master plan implementation committee, so they might be a good phone a friend for best practices.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to learn from other people who've found a good way to do things. I don't want to reinvent the wheel if I don't have to.
I did have a question with regards to what, I'm sorry, I forget who mentioned it earlier. We talked about maybe taking the squishiness out of the priority level. So coming up with some sort of indices or some sort of, you know, I don't know if it's a weighted average that, you know, if checks this many boxes and ranks this high, it gets a high. If it only comes to this, checks this many boxes, it's a low. I'm not sure. And we also talked about ROI. I'm not sure if you want to dig into taking the squishiness out of some of the subjective factors tonight. It would be helpful for us to return this to you in the latest and greatest if we could not nail that down, though.
I mean, I was the one that had initially brought up the idea. I really like it. It's additional work to create a weighted average in a matrix like that, but it will give you some sort of quantitative output where you'll actually have some sort of ranking or number. There are a lot of free tools that exist on the internet that will, you know, spit you out a matrix where you essentially just have to put in your line items, and you know the math is already done for you. I know that Smartsheets has one that I've used a lot for prioritization for certain items in my day job. It's essentially what we would have to agree upon is sort of what the criteria is to be weighted across. But once you have that, it kind of all falls into place, because oftentimes it's pretty, if you choose the right criteria, it's pretty obvious, right? I don't know what everybody else's feelings are about going down that route.
Yeah, I think, in principle, I've, seen that done. I've done that. The key to that is picking the right factors to include in this. What factors should influence the priorities, and how much weight do you give each one of those factors? And then, off the top of my head, I don't know where I would start to try to list out those factors. But it's not to say it can't be done. Just that I'm not sure what I would include in that. That's just me.
I don't think we have to build it tonight. I mean, perhaps it's just something to think about over the next couple of weeks. I know you're saying that you want to get this back to us sooner rather than later. However, I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. If really the prioritization or priority is the one thing that kind of gets left blank for a little while. But at any rate, I'm happy to come up with some ideas and email them to you, Dave, if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good point, that the structure of the matrix, there's a column for priority, and what we're discussing right now is how do we fill out that column? But I think there's probably little question that we need a representation of priority, and if among the several of us we can come up with a good list of factors and potentially weights. But again, the first thing is, what factors should influence the priority, and then when you kind of know what your factors are, then you can sort of compare them and weigh them, decide how much weight to give them, and then yes, it's just a matter of calculation to to put that together. That's the easy part.
What I would propose is we can finish all of the matrix, and we can do the entire thing and leave the priority blank while you folks work on that.
That's certainly plausible. Sue, your hand is up.
Yeah, the Capital Planning Committee had a matrix that we used to determine priority for various things for the capital project. I'll see if I could dig it up and use it. It hasn't been used in a while, but it did give a list of things of what would make it high or low, and what you had to look at. So I'll see if I can dig it up. I don't know if it would be useful for this though, but it was just for capital projects. It wasn't for anything else.
Yeah, but that could be useful, at least as an example of how you might prioritize various elements.
Totally.
Probably a better example than the one I have at hand, which is the prioritization of land parcels for acquisition as open space, where we had, and we at this primarily the staff at Central Mass Regional Planning who created this, but they identified 12 factors which are related to a piece of land's value as open space, and we grouped them into four groups or three group, I forget. Anyway, we had 12 factors and we assigned them various weights. The specific factors are probably not particularly relevant to the master plan action items, so I don't think it would be helpful to look at that. The process, yes, but the actual factors, no. All right. So, any other questions or comments on this? So I think where we're going to go with this, Dominique and Sarah, is fill out the complete matrix. And again, that's just going to be, it's going to reflect all of the action items that are found in the other chapters of the plan and pull them in. So fill that matrix out. Any edits to the, I didn't hear any particular suggestions for changing the narrative that we have on the screen in front of us, but anything that comes to mind, edit, fill that out or modify it as you fit. The matrix itself, we're going to kind of leave the priorities up in the air. We might have a sort of an initial guess at some of the priorities, but besides working on the narrative, the implementation plan narrative and matrix, some of us are going to be thinking about factors that would go into influencing the priority and see if we can't come up with a list of factors and a weighting to help make the priority something a little bit more than just kind of an intuitive guess. So is that where we're at with the implementation at this point?
Yes.
Okay. If we're all set with that for the moment, then the next thing I had on the agenda was to address comments and questions from the February meeting.
Yes, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think the question we had follow-up for was on the Native American resolution in the Natural Cultural Resources chapter. So Sam and I touched base with the Office for Indian Affairs on the state level, and they advised that we do take it out as an action item for now. So we erased the action item in the most current draft that's in the Dropbox and added just a few sentences on the resolution in the history section. So I think it's pages 4 and 5 pretty early, where we talk in depth about the history of the Hasamanisco tribe on the local level with state and national milestones. So we kept it in the plan, just in the narrative as a milestone, but did take out that action item in the most recent draft based on their guidance.
Okay, so
Did they give you a reason why they wanted the action item taken out?
They advised, based on the concerns of this group, that the resolution isn't legally binding, that is correct at this
Okay.
time. There have been court cases, so a few of the webinars and sources that we had referenced did believe that it was more legally binding, but that office said that it was less so for the purposes of the master plan.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
I think that's the only update we had on the chapters. We're expecting to have the full designed draft chapters by our next meeting as well. So all the narrative that we have confirmed in this committee will be prepared in a similar way to we saw the non-chapter elements that Elena presented a few months ago.
and I'm sure we'll all be very interested in reading through all that and providing any additional comments we may have, any corrections that we might notice that we haven't already seen. And I think probably most of us have not seen the latest draft text. I think the draft documents that I'm seeing on the Dropbox are, most of them kind of dated at this point, like 3 months ago, 9 months ago. No. So I'm not sure how up to date what we can see on the Dropbox. I'm not sure if that reflects the latest work you've done.
The content for those earlier chapters should be about the same. It's mostly those small little changes we're making to grammar, those small things catching as we're doing the secondary edits. But yeah, we hope to get those more revised drafts as soon as possible out.
Yep. I know I'm very interested in reading through the whole thing from front to back and catching any little things that I see. I think one of the things I want to make sure that we end up with and that's really, those of us on the working group here are in a good position to read through and see, does this all look like it fits Grafton? Little things like, naming things and places in Grafton. We want to make sure that, that I occasionally see documents that are cut and pasted from another town. I don't know if I've seen one in specific Grafton. I remember running across something within the last year or two where, it was written, and I think this is probably something that was a draft document written for Grafton where they pasted in text from that named another town. It's things like that we want to make. I think all of us are interested in making sure that, when this plan is finally done, that it's really all about Grafton, and it doesn't look like it was for somebody else and just sort of thrown in. And in everything I've reviewed so far, I've not seen a lot of that, so it's not a major concern. But it's like the little details.
Yeah, that sounds committee is very helpful.
So we can look forward at our next meeting, which will be, what's the date in April? April 7th. Yeah. That would be our next meeting, April 7th. We'll expect to see complete implementation matrix. We can talk about prioritization factors. We maybe will see the first draft of a complete document.
Correct.
And we can look forward to actually getting this task done. We've been at it for nearly 2 years as a working group here. Anybody have anything else? If not, the chair might be willing to recognize a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded that this meeting be adjourned. Mr. Carroll,
Yep, aye.
Ms. Duckworth,
Aye.
Ms. Fox,
Aye.
Mr. Hool,
Aye.
Ms. Gimbel,
Aye.
Mr. Petrie. Mr. Petrie has left the building. Mr. Robbins votes aye. Ms. Robbins.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.